Welcome back, everyone. Is here, and today I've got some r/traumatize them back for you all. As per usual, I'll be reading the post, giving you my opinions, and I hope you do the same down in the comments below. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Used wafer 6049. My grandpa's death stopped my worst work client in the middle of their rant. This story is from about 20 years now. I work in my family's company. At the time, my dad was still running the show day to day, and very involved in most of the big meetings we had. We were in the middle of a stressful and busy project with our very worst client, who had long ago burned up all goodwill with us from their shitty treatment of us. I used to say, by the time we're done with this project, everyone on our team will have earned a nickel an hour on it, from the significant extra work we did. I learned to charge more later. My dad's dad lived about an hour away from me/our office, and my uncle lived close by him, so he was supposed to take Grandpa to his doctor's appointment for something that morning. Uncle phoned the office early. He had gone over to Grandpa's house to pick him up and found that Grandpa had passed in his sleep. We said Grandpa hated going to the doctor so much he died instead of going. Our family has a bit of a dark sense of humor, as did Grandpa. My dad rushed out to meet his brother and help with the arrangements and the funeral home folks. Well, apparently, in the chaos of all of that, we'd forgotten that asshole client had a conference call with my dad set up for that morning. I answered their call and said dear old dad was out, and they just lost it, screaming and cussing up a storm. "This is so unprofessional! He said he'd be here for our call!" So, in my lowest growl possible, I shot back. "Well, I mean, his dad died this morning and he's on the way to identify the body. I can probably have him call you from the coroner's office if you'd like." Ooh, the air was sucked out of the call, and they did their best to backtrack and apologize. They knew this was my dad they were calling for. Grandpa would have laughed his ass off to know that he was able to shut up our worst client, and we still tell this story today. So this is tangentially related, but I remember a quote from a professor, not one of mine, who said that if he quit his job, so many family members would definitely be alive for the holidays because the amount of family members that die before finals is astonishing. Hopefully I don't need to explain the joke for you, but sometimes, if not most of the time, usually it's someone faking the death of a family member to get out of some kind of obligation. It's fairly common. I've unfortunately done it when I was younger, and I'm sure some of you have as well. But even if it is a common excuse for the one time that it actually is the correct reason for why things are the way they are, you don't want to be the guy who questions it and the asshole because of it. Or else you'll end up like this poor guy who had the wind knocked out of his sails and had to backtrack rapidly and probably felt like a total asshole for, well, to this day, and probably still thinks about it. I had an encounter like this a while back and thankfully was able to navigate this to a point where I've learned that the best way to handle a situation where someone is late to something or a situation's occurred that was not planned, sometimes it's best to calmly ask for the reason why and figure out if some kind of unforeseen circumstance happened instead of blowing up at the person and being angry with them. When I worked in fast food, I had been abandoned on my shift and I was the one person working a 4-person job. We were already critically understaffed and it was supposed to be 2 people working a 4-person job, but still, I was 1 person working a 4-person job and I was really upset as to why my coworker was a no-show. I couldn't get someone to fill in for the schedule. I was pretty much in the middle of a Sunday rush, running that by myself and running ragged, and lo and behold, 2 hours after the rush, my coworker finally shows up, and thankfully, I saw their face before I got angry with them, and was, in that moment, smart enough to ask them what's going on before being upset with them for the fact that they were late. I found out they had to rush their pet ferret to the vet because it ate something it wasn't supposed to, and that's why they were late. The ferret survived, by the way. Shiny Moon. Sell our dogs to have children? Sir, I'm sterile. A while ago, my fiance, 32 male, and I, 26 female, went to a birthday party of one of his cousins where I got to meet some of his not-so-close relatives. There was a moment where one of his uncles started some small talk with us. Your regular, "Oh, how long have you been together? What are your future plans?" Eventually, that conversation led to the topic of children. I do not want to have children, specifically on our current financial situation. We already have 4 dogs that he adopted before we got together, and our combined incomes are barely enough to cover our expenses. Also, due to medical reasons, I'm very low on weight and a pregnancy could easily get a lot of complications and risks. My fiancé is very supportive and on my side, and despite the fact that he'd like to have children, he's never tried to persuade or pressure me on wanting children. When his uncle asked, "So, when you having kids?" my fiancé jumped up front, knowing that the topic makes me uncomfortable, and politely answered that we're not planning on having children anytime soon. His uncle insisted. "Why not? Children are the joy of life." My fiancé responded in a playful way. "Children? In this economy? I don't think so," and started laughing. His uncle got pushy and went for, "When you have kids, you work to keep them afloat." My fiancé tried to keep polite and replied with, "We already have 4 dogs and they're little troublemakers, just like kids, and our salary already goes on kibble and rent." His uncle kept pushing and directly said, "Well, I mean, you can sell the dogs and have kids." Jesus Christ. My fiancé tried to keep a straight face, but couldn't hide his annoyance at such a comment. At that moment, I jumped in. I stared at his uncle directly to his eyes, and with a tiny smile, I said, "Sir, I'm sterile." His face dropped. He simply stuttered, "Oh, I'm sorry, I had no idea." But even then, I don't know why I gave him that accent, oh my god. But even then, he had the audacity to turn to my mother-in-law and ask her, "Is this true?" She was in the same table and witnessed the whole conversation. My mother-in-law simply answered, "I don't know. Ask her." He couldn't get himself up to try and ask me again, so he just awkwardly laughed and changed the topic. Sorry for the bad grammar, English is not my first language, but I wanted to share the story. Honestly, I feel the most bad for the mother-in-law for being dragged into that situation. That is not a good place to be in. Like, OP handled it brilliantly, don't get me wrong, and that's not a fun position to be in for OP or her husband. But the mother-in-law, that was unnecessary collateral damage. Good God, that poor woman. And she handled it well too. Let's just be clear. Directing the uncle back towards it is, I don't know, ask her. And that's not even covering the insulting portion of the uncle deferring to the mother-in-law to ask about her daughter-in-law's medical history, as if she would be a better authority on it. I don't know, something about that rubs me the extra wrong way, and that's not even talking about the dog comment. Like, I can't even imagine someone telling me like, "Hey, sell your pet so you can have a kid that you're not financially ready for." Rem 9612, your socks don't match. To start, I need to give some backstory. I, 27 female, had a life-changing accident at work 4 years ago, and am now handicapped. Due to my injury, I have to wear a compression sock because the circulation in my right leg is poor, and my foot swells up almost 3 times its size. I only have all black compression socks that go up to my knee, but I only wear it on my right leg, because I like fun socks on my other foot. I wear brightly colored ankle socks on my left foot, so it's obvious that I'm wearing mismatched socks. Well, about 2 years after my accident, I was at work talking with a nice coworker. We'll call her T, and she shared an office with another coworker. We'll call her K. K gives off mean girl vibes, like someone who would make an embarrassing observation loudly to make you uncomfortable, or talk about you behind your back but be super nice to your face. You know, that type of girl. Well, I was talking to T about work and K loudly goes, OP, your socks don't match," with a mean girl tone and a giggle. Now, I disassociated heavily about my leg. I know I need therapy, it's on the list. So the comment didn't really hurt me, but if I was someone else in that situation, it could have. So I decided to say something. With the most defeated look, I turned to her, took a deep, shaky breath, and said, "Oh, yeah, that's a medical device I wear to support my bum leg. I wish I could wear cool socks on both feet," and just ended by looking at the floor. She stuttered, but didn't say anything at first. But then she got up to leave the office and mumbled something about it being a joke and I'm too serious. Like, get bent, K. That comment could have brought me to tears if it was said too soon after my accident. I know this isn't as impressive as the other TraumatizeThemBack stories, but it was a small victory for me being able to humble that mean girl, and hopefully she thinks twice about saying about someone else's appearance. Honestly, I prefer the more grounded TraumatizeThemBack stories because one of the reasons I don't cover this subreddit that often is because a lot of them are, well, if I'm gonna put it bluntly, either incredibly fake or heavily dramatized in hopes of them appearing in one of these videos, whether it's mine or another YouTuber's. Like, I've gone out of my way on this subreddit to try to read the ones that I believe at least could be true. there are ones that are posted here which are just blatantly false, and it's gotten to the point where people in the comments have complained about the fact that the no fake post rule isn't being enforced in the subreddit. Seems like that's been changing recently, which is really nice actually. And the reason I'm even bringing this up is because posts like this are the ones that I enjoy seeing. I feel bad because all the fake and crazy ones that get the most coverage overshadow the ones like these that actually have been grounded in reality. It almost creates a situation where people feel like they have to embellish on details in order for their post to get attention. And of course, I'm not saying every post is fake, obviously. I'm just saying that this subreddit has recently had a plague of fake posts being put on it, and it's made me not want to cover this as much as I used to. Because we're in a position now where posters who want to share their stories feel like they have to apologize because their trauma isn't as bad as others. Just Bubba Shrimp. They stopped asking for grandchildren real quick. My parents are the ex-super conservative Christian type. They've grown a lot and now they're pretty accepting, but still new to the idea of sexuality and non-nuclear relationships, and the idea that not everybody wants kids. I have 4 siblings, and they implicitly expect typical marriage and lots of grandkids. The whole kit and caboodle. You know how it is. Back around when I turned 18 or 19, somewhere around the age, when parents seem to start incessantly reminding you that you're an adult and that grandkids would be wonderful. I got the standard treatment of exactly that. Every few days, the topic would pop up of, when are we getting grandkids? One day, my older sister and I were in the kitchen casually chatting with mom and dad when, as they seem to do, the topic of grandkids came up again. My sister at the time wasn't very out about the fact that she is very lesbian. And I wasn't really out about my preparations for transition and the fact that I was dating guys without them really knowing at the time. We brushed it off as usual, saying we don't really want kids, just cuz. But that day, for some reason, they kept pushing and insisting we consider marriage and kids. My sister was very clearly uncomfortable with the notion, insisting that she very adamantly did not want marriage at this point in her life. I was in a similar boat. My mother was asking why I wouldn't just consider it. I don't know why. I don't know if I was having a bad morning, if I was hungover or what, but I looked my mother dead in the eyes with my exasperated morning stare and said, "You're not getting grandkids because I have with men, mother." The room was very, very quiet, apart from a single cackling snort from my sister. My dad attempted a saving throw with, "Well, you just mean that you don't want to get married yet." I proceeded to divert my tired, blank stare and said perfectly, straight-faced, "No, it's just 'cause I dudes." I think at that point the conversation awkwardly turned somewhere entirely different, and I finished my breakfast and went out on errands or something. Nothing was spoken of that morning, and they have never pestered me or my sister about grandkids again. See, real talk, this is a conversation that I dreaded having with my parents when I was still trying to figure myself out, was the, they want grandkids, but how do I explain to them it's kind of a coin flip if I'm gonna be able to have biological kids or not? Kind of boat. But, that is where adopting comes in. Anxious Axolotl 4. My tattoo is in poor taste? Thanks for hating on my dead parents' memory. I, 24-year-old male, used to work at a hotel, mostly doing the overnights. Almost a year ago, we lost my stepdad, and we lost my grandma 2 months later. My family wasn't, and still aren't, in the best shape. My mom, about a month after we lost my bonus dad, went to get a tattoo as a small memorial. I went with her, and since the artist was a friend of hers and had no more appointments, he took me as a walk-in to get something as well, my first tattoo. A few days after, I was at work one night and an elderly couple walked in. They were really nice until I went to hand them their room keys and my sleeve hitched up enough that the woman saw my tattoo peeking out. She scoffed and pointed at it saying, "You really shouldn't have that in such a visible place. It's really poor taste that kids these days keep damaging their bodies just because they think it's cool. That's actually pretty trashy." Her husband looked over it, as though he was used to hearing her run her mouth, but I was at a breaking point. It had just been a month since losing my bonus dad at that point, and my grandma wasn't looking too good either. So I put on the biggest smile I could, my eyes already slightly misty with tears, which freaked them out further, and told her, "I'm sorry you think that, ma'am. However, you should know I got this just the other day because I lost my father last month to cancer, and it's not been easy." The woman looked mortified, and her face went bright red in embarrassment, and the husband started to apologize. He grabbed their keys and started pushing her towards the elevator, quietly telling her, "This is why we keep our opinions to ourselves," wife's name. For context, it isn't even a big tattoo or any image. It's just a little line on my wrist that says JK Livin', because that was my bonus dad's motto. Even when he faced challenges and obstacles, he would just keep living, and I intend to do the same. I hope my tears made her feel lower than shit. Memorial tattoos are always really sweet, and I'm happy that you have something like that to remember your... Honestly, calling them a bonus dad is a really sweet way of putting it. Honestly, there's very few tattoos that mean no Third Reichy, but at the same time, as long as it's within reason and not something just completely offensive, feel free to do what you want to your body. Like, it's your body, do what you want with it. I never understood the stigma behind it. Like, I'm aware there's a pretty storied history with tattoos on people of lower class, criminals, sailors, and whatnot, but at the same time, it's the modern era, and most people weren't alive during those days. Including boomers in these stories, I just don't get it. Perhaps it's just such a generational disconnect that has me isolated from it. I also do understand the religious aspect of it, but that seems to mostly be in older generations. I don't know, the conversation of tattoos never really comes up in my life because I don't personally have any tattoos, and it just isn't something I really have a conversation about with people and their dislike of tattoos. So I'd be interested to hear in the comments of what y'all have to think or say about it because it'd be cool for me to learn. Vivid Sir 755. How my grandpa got back at his school bully 20 years later. In an LA school, my grandpa was tormented by a school bully growing up. Let's call him Billy. Billy would always take my grandpa's lunch money and punk him. My grandpa never forgot Billy, or what he looked like. Later on, when my grandpa was in his early 30s, he saw Billy at a local burrito place in town after many years of never seeing him. My grandpa didn't go up to him. Billy never noticed my grandpa, but my grandpa saw him. Later that night, my grandpa was at a bar with his brother, and wouldn't you know it, Billy walked in. The place was packed, so my grandpa offered Billy a seat at his table. Billy had no idea who he was. He just thought he was a nice guy being friendly. They got to talking about their lives and what they do for a living, and my grandpa told Billy that he was a mind reader, and he's done shows in Vegas and all over. Billy thought it was cool. So my grandpa said, "Yeah, I'll read your mind for $20. I'll tell you what you did earlier today." Billy gave him the $20. My grandpa said, "Think of where you were earlier today." And after a few seconds, he said the name of a burrito place, and Billy was blown away. My grandpa then said, "For $20 more, I'll tell you what you ordered." The man paid, and of course, my grandpa got it right. Finally, my grandpa said, "For $40, I'll tell you what school you went to for elementary." Billy paid again, and my grandpa got it right. By the end of the night, my grandpa left with around $200, and Billy never knew a thing. And that's how my grandpa got back at his school bully, and Billy was none the wiser. I like the idea of Billy going around and telling a story of like, yeah, this guy knew where I went to elementary school, he knew all these things about me, he knew where I ate the burrito at, and it's just like, to everyone else, it's obvious, like, oh, this guy just conned you because he probably went to elementary school with you, you dumbass. But Billy in the moment was blown away by the mysticism of it, to the point where he was willing to spend $200, possibly in the 90s, which after inflation, that's a lot of money. My guess would also be that there was a little bit of the grandpa taking advantage of someone who was a bit intoxicated, because if they're at a bar having a good time, my guess would be the drinks were flowing. And Billy, at that point having less cognitive ability than your local NYC subway rat, probably fell right into the trap. Fryo night. Mother's boyfriend decided I was lying about not being able to eat certain foods. So firstly, greetings! This happened back when I was around 8 or 9 years old, back in a very small town, like 1,000 people small. My mother never really had a good taste in men, but at the time, the guy she was dating, whom I'll call Kev, seemed alright by me, a rare thing overall. And one evening, Kev decided to go out of his way on the way home from work, a 2-hour drive, to pick up some KFC. He had called and asked my mom what she and I wanted, and my mom told him anything is good, but just no coleslaw, as I can't eat it. I could hear him over the phone questioning her about it, but she didn't want to talk about it for the most part. And when he got home, he had gotten some coleslaw for himself. But everything seemed okay at the time. Now, for some context, I suffer from a food trauma with anything that has texture consistency with coleslaw or potato salad. It has nothing to do with the ingredients, just the texture. This stems back to when I lived with my half-siblings' dad and grandmother, as their grandma had a tendency to make one of those 2 dishes for every lunch and dinner for 2 years. And, you know, the old, "You're not leaving the table until you finish your plate." Now back to the main story. So about 3 days after he had brought home the KFC, my mom actually had to be out of town for most of the day for her one job at the time. So Kev had this wonderful idea. He went to Walmart, leaving me at home for about 2 hours. But I was used to that by that time. And he brought home 2 large tubs. Those old, rounded 128 fluid ounce ones. One of Neapolitan ice cream, and the other coleslaw. When he got home, I did help him bring in the groceries, and then he sat me down at the table. Then he says, "I know you're lying to your mom about not being able to eat coleslaw, so I'm going to do what my friend's dad did when my friend told him he couldn't eat peanut butter anymore. You're going to sit here until this tub is gone. I'll even help you finish it, and afterwards, we can have ice cream." I stared at him with this dumbfounded look and said, "You know this is going to make me sick, right?" And he cuts me off, telling me to stop lying to him. At this point, I know I was not going to be getting out of this with my stomach contents intact. So I quickly took 1 spoonful of coleslaw and shoveled it down. At this point, my body immediately starts to react in the form of dry heaving. And Kev now realized he may have actually f***ed up. He tells me I don't have to eat anymore. And I remember so clearly looking at him dead in the eyes as I forced another spoonful of coleslaw into my mouth. I, however, did not get to swallow, as everything came back up pretty much at that instant and right out onto the table, his lap, and the floor. I did, however, make sure not to puke into the coleslaw. At this point, Kev was now panicking, as A, I had just thrown up, B, the whole house now smelled of throw up, and C, he had a whole jug of coleslaw. He had me run to my bathroom before I could throw up anymore. Afterwards told me I can have as much ice cream as I wanted and asked me not to tell my mom about this, and then left me to my own devices for the evening. And I honestly had no plans of telling my mom. Oh no, I know full well my mom was going to fit the pieces together the moment she got home, as my mom knows I have an iron stomach, and there was only a handful of things that can make me throw up. So my mom got home late that night, and me and Kev were sitting in the living room as I watched him play Resident Evil 2, and I realized it was probably a bad idea back then due to my recent PTSD issues I was having at the time for unrelated issues. And while Kev did manage to clean up the mess and used way too much air freshener, there's not much you can do to fully get rid of that bile smell. She asked pretty much right off the bat why the house smelled like vomit, and Kev straight up told her that I threw up. She immediately started asking me if I was sick. I told her no, and simply pointed at the fridge. You see, at the time we were struggling a bit, and throwing away food was a no-go, but my mom wasn't normally the one to cook, and thus was rarely in the fridge. I did tell Kev I wasn't going to tell her about it, after all. And my mom quickly pieced together what had happened after seeing the huge tub of coleslaw in the fridge, and oh boy, did Kev get f***ing torn into. As not only did he do this behind her back, but my mom took this as a personal attack against her honesty. I have kind of a similar story to this. So back when I was like 6 or 7, my parents were throwing me into summer camp when I was younger, and you know, the usual kind of stuff. And, well, there was a summer camp, I don't really know to call him like a teacher or like a caretaker or whatever, and she just f***ing hated me. In retrospect, she probably hated my mom, which meant she hated me. And like, she was on my ass about everything. She did not like me. And it's not like I was a bad kid or anything, she just didn't f***ing like me. because all the other caretakers and instructor types didn't have a single problem with me. So that's why I'm pretty sure she didn't like my mom and the anger was put out towards me. But anyways, one time during like a little field trip / excursion, they brought tuna sandwiches. Now me, I don't like tuna. Don't know why, just don't. Like, it was a visceral reaction to how much I do not like tuna. Nowadays, I can eat tuna if it's in front of me, but I'm not a fan of it. I won't go out of my way to make anything tuna related. It's just not in my cup of tea. And I've tried. Now roll back to 6-year-old, 7-year-old me who was not quite acclimated to food yet and still had massive problems with food touching each other, was now having a tuna fish sandwich. Now granted, most of the meals that they would pack at the little summer camp thingy were great. I would scarf those down and get right back to the playground or whatever the hell we were doing at the time. But on that specific day, it was tuna, and I just sat there, took one bite, didn't like it, and stared at it. And my buddy, who also didn't like tuna, had the bright idea to actually go and ask the teacher that he could have something else to eat. And sure enough, they had a couple of ham and cheese sandwiches packed for this exact instance. I saw that he was able to get away with the tuna fish sandwich and actually have a regular food that was compatible with his stomach, and I thought, oh, I can do that too. So I walk up, ask the same question, and she says, no, you're just lying because you want to have a ham and cheese sandwich. Go finish your tuna. And I remember sitting there for nearly an hour staring at that sandwich because I did not want it, as all of my other friends were able to go run around and play and do whatever the hell they wanted, while I was stuck just staring there because I couldn't just throw the sandwich away. I had to finish it. So I was just sitting in the grass, staring at that stupid sandwich while she was fuming at me. And all I could think was like, why would I fake not liking tuna if I could just eat this sandwich and go and play at the park, huh? There is Gushers on the line. Why would I lie about this? This was nearly 20 years ago and it still holds a place in my brain for pure spite. Don't forget, this is brought to you by GamerSupps. Use code ODDS at checkout. It's basically a caffeine powder that you put in your water, and I actually really like it. I use this on a daily basis. Don't forget that every purchase you make using code ODDS directly supports the channel. And if you want a personal recommendation from me, I would either recommend the Soda Pressing Pear or Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are currently my favorite flavors. And as a note, once we sell a certain amount of stuff, I get my own flavor and my own cup, and you all know I'm gonna choose some degenerate shit that's gonna make their PR team squirm. My goal is to make them regret partnering with me. So please, use code ODDS at checkout to make my dream come true of making a PR team squirm.